Come on in, sit back and relax. You're listening to episode 250 of the WealthTech Today podcast. I'm your host, Craig Iskowitz, founder of Ezra Group Consulting. And this podcast features interviews, news, and analysis on the trends and best practices all around wealth management technology. My guest today was Devon Drew, founder and CEO of AssetLink. Now, prior to founding AssetLink in late 2021, Devon had a very long career in wealth management, mostly as a financial advisor, moving through firms such as Merrill Lynch, JP Morgan, Alger, American Century, and Vanguard. We spoke about a bit of an overview on AssetLink, in case you don't know what they do, how they offer sales enablement for wealth and asset managers. Give a bit of a technology overview, talk about how they reduce friction, what their ideal user profile is, and some differentiation. So it was a very in-depth interview. I think you are really going to like it. But before we get started, let's talk about tech stacks. Now, here at Ezra Group, we've seen tech stacks of literally hundreds of RIAs and broker-dealers, and let me tell you, most of them are loaded down with tech debt. And let's face it, tech debt can act like an anchor holding down your firm's efficiency and your ability to scale. So if you want to free your firm up for exponential growth, you need to run, not walk, to our website, EzraGroup.com, and click on the golden Contact Us button on the homepage. Our experienced team here can evaluate your current tech ecosystem, deliver targeted recommendations, optimize your existing systems and operations, or even run an RFP and help you implement a new software platform to get your firm to the next level. Now, you can take advantage of our free initial consultation offer by going to EzraGroup.com. All right, a couple quick housekeeping tasks before we start. Please subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss an episode. Please check out our sponsor, the Invest in Others Charitable Foundation. You can find them at investinothers.org. All right, let's kick this thing off. I'm excited to introduce our next guest on the program. It is Devon Drew, founder and CEO of AssetLink. Hey, Devon, thanks for being here, man.
Craig, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
I'm glad you can make it. And we just met at the Morningstar conference, and that was quite an opportune moment for us to cross paths.
You know, it was a pleasure meeting you in Chicago. You know, during that conference, we had the opportunity to showcase our technology to the crowd there, and was happy to, was appreciative of you taking the time to have me demo it to you and your team. So thank you for that.
Yeah, well, I really like what you guys have going, and I'm surprised we hadn't crossed paths earlier. So I was happy that we did at that time. That's why we get out of the house and go to conferences, so we can meet people we haven't seen yet. Where are you calling in from?
So I am in Houston, Texas, by way of Irvington, New Jersey, actually.
Hey now, shout out for New Jersey.
In New Jersey, yep, absolutely.
Represent top of the food chain. I'm in Sayreville, which is a bit south of Irvington, but in central Jersey. So you're one of the few people in the few areas of the country where it's actually more hot and humid than in New Jersey.
So not only hot and humid, but I feel like every month there's a weather event, right? There was a tornado and hurricane within a month and a half of each other. So you know, got home and didn't have power for a week. So gotta love it. I'm probably one of the few people that are looking to actually move back to the Northeast as opposed to.
Come on back to New Jersey. We love to have you here.
Yeah, one of the few people that's looking that way.
Exactly. All right, let's jump in. Devon, give us a 30-second elevator pitch for AssetLink.
So AssetLink is a client relationship intelligence tool that really connects the wealth management ecosystem. We enable investment firms to gain deeper insights into their clients and prospective clients, saving them time, saving them money, and saving headcount. A good way to think about us is that connective tissue and a very robust and modern sales enablement tool for investment firms.
Sales enablement is something that we never really heard of much in the wealth and asset management industry. It had been available in other areas, or very generic tools, but tools that are really focused in wealth and asset management and call themselves sales enablement is a relatively new term. So can you describe for our audience of wealth and asset managers what specifically it means by sales enablement? How does it help them improve the way they sell?
Yeah, so taking a step back, right? We're in an environment where there's a tremendous amount of data, right? And thinking about, how we came about this, right? Investment firms only use 30% of their data, which is surprising, but a lot of firms are around that 10 to 15% number, right? So in order to effectively sell and create a sales enablement tool, you really have to be an expert of data unification and data aggregation, right? And that sounds easy, but as you can appreciate in that, it's not, right? So being able
Oh,
to
sure.
go in data points, whether it's a .mov, MP4, PDF, and be able to unify it, right? And make it searchable. Then once it's searchable, then you can make it indexable, right? And then once you can make data at scale indexable, then you could use technology more specifically like retrieval augmentation of the large language model. So then be able to pull out any pertinent type of data point so that your sales and business development individuals could use that at the point of sale and also when they're doing advisor or client research, right? So sounds easy, it's not, right? And artificial intelligence is a big buzzword. However, that is just a sprinkles on top, right? First, you have to find out where the data sources are, then being able to unify all the data, then being able to have the skill set to implement artificial intelligence, and then put it into where your salespeople view the most, right? In this case, most of the times it's CRM systems. So when you start talking about sales enablement, it's something that's been a position within firms that have been allocated towards recently. And it takes a bigger effort than most people think in order to come to market with a sales enablement tool.
Devon, what was the driving factor that um, made you want to build this type of application? What were you lacking? What did you see as lacking in your experience? I mean, you've been in the industry quite some time, stints at JP Morgan, Alger, Vanguard. What did you see that drove you to say, I need to launch this company to build this kind of tool?
It's not really what I saw, what I did see, but what I did not see, right? And at Vanguard, it was my job to position Vanguard's ETFs and mutual funds to the financial advisor community. It is a very competitive industry, right? It's an industry within asset management and wealth distribution that $50 billion a year is spent on, right? Now, even though there's a concerted effort across 13,000 different investment firms out there to sell into the financial advisors. What I did not see is a tool that allowed me to have my CRM system, which at the time in Vanguard was Microsoft Dynamics, to be a living, breathing organism to where it's feeding me insights, right? It's feeding me intelligence. As an example, if I were traveling to a specific territory and I wanted to find out who has the highest propensity to do, core bonds, right? I would have to go on one screen with my CRM. I had to go on another screen, look at my data packs, then go to another screen for transaction reports, then go to another screen to look for LinkedIn and Twitter insights, and go to another screen for my, content management, another screen for my geography management, right? And all of a sudden, I'm 30, 40 minutes in, and I have to do about 30 meetings of these a week, right? So when you
Hmm.
start thinking about 30 to 40 minutes per advisor doing the research, and all of a sudden you got to do 30 meetings a week for 52 weeks a year, you're talking about 50, 60,000 hours a year of wasted time, right? And what we found is that 88% of both asset managers and wealth managers find that whole process friction filled and cumbersome. So if it's a problem for me at Vanguard, it's a problem for the advisor at Morgan Stanley or LPL or Schwab, right? Because they're getting bombarded all day, every day with calls, emails, people showing up at the office, and all advisors are trying to do is minimize that exposure within these firms so that they could easily source, discover, diligence to meet their clients' needs.
Yeah, that's cool. That's you saw what wasn't there and filled the need. Well, I think is a great way to describe that. One of the things I liked when I got the demo of your platform was how clean it looks and how easy it is to find the information you need. Um, Are you seeing that firms that are using your platform are driving down to any particular areas of the platform? Which are the ones that are most useful?
Yeah, so if you think about like our chatbot feature, right, and being able to train it not just off of the rudimentary, where did Craig go to college, right? But being able to ask a sophisticated questions such as, hey, I'm looking for a interval fund, or hey, I'm looking for a large cap value separately managed account with a top decile performance, a portfolio manager that's been in place for 15 years, and that's available on Schwab and Fidelity, right? So the feature that folks are being drawn to is just the functionality of being able to speak any question that's top of mind for them, and being able to get a clear and concise response from our Gen AI.
Looking at the chatbot feature when you demoed it to us, I thought it was pretty cool where you could say, what's the best strategy to engage this advisor if I'm an asset manager? And based on all the data you've gathered, it would say, well, this advisor spends a lot of his time in this particular area of Florida. He specializes in estate and tax planning, so you should focus on that. It's best time to reach him are these times a day. How does that work? And where does that data come from? How are you compiling it to be able to deliver in this clear, concise manner?
So that goes back to investment firms only using 30% of their data, right? So for folks on the call, you know how much data that you consume, data that's probably in your CRM system, you haven't used it, right? So imagine we could unlock the power of all of your data, right? From your meeting notes, from your data packs, from AssetLink, we also look at social data as well, right? So you'd be surprised how many folks have tagged certain restaurants on Facebook or Instagram, or mentioned something on Twitter, or posted a picture of lasagna from Carbone's in New York City, or
Mm,
whatever have you, right?
mm.
There's so much data at our disposal now, and now that financial advisors, especially ones that are independent and registered investment advisors, are able to post, and they're able to speak to more than just the rudimentary compliance approved cookie cutter content that was being able to post in years past, right? So there's a lot of data that's out there that we capture from socials, that we unlock for different investment firms, and then the sum of that data, which will end up being more than 200 plus data sources, we're able to retrieve that data at scale, which allows for hypersensitive functionality of any type of question that is pertinent to you.
Can you expand on your statement about reducing friction in the relationship between asset and wealth managers?
Yeah, I mean, just thinking about like the spray and pray distribution, right? I mean, there was an advisor who sought us out, right? And he actually showed us an email thread of several interactions
Mhm,
with asset managers. And we're in an environment where alts is a big buzzword, and
mhm,
there's a lot of attention paid to private credit, private equity, real estate, whatever have you. And he kept getting emails about webinars for alts. He
mhm,
kept getting emails, wholesalers trying to sell him alts. And everything was, I do not do alts. I do not do alts. I
mhm.
do not do alts, right? Now, that when you're talking about the relationship between asset managers and wealth managers is what we call spray and pray distribution,
Mhm.
right? When you're taking a few selling signals maybe, but you are literally trying to sell what is ever in your toolbox, so to
Mhm.
speak, right? But what if there is an environment, right, when we were able to unlock an advisor's data, and based off his or her 13Fs, based off of his or her variances in their ADVs on a quarterly basis, right? Based off of what you are looking at from a content perspective, what if we were able to flip that script on its head, and instead of you getting bombarded with calls, emails, texts, whatever have you, your ideal investment solution was able to find you because of your own data, without the, rigmarole of thousands of investment and insurance providers all knocking down your door, right? And I think that's the future of asset management distribution. I'm very fortunate where I spend most of my days talking to executives from wealth firms and heads of distribution, heads of sales enablement for asset and investment firms, and everyone's trying to figure this out. And this one large $1 trillion shop said, "Hey, we've been trying to figure this out for 5 years now, right?" So it's like there's a lot of resources being put in place to try to solve and make folks smarter. But I'm sure you can appreciate as the years go on, the numbers and the sales goals, so to speak, for these investment sales professionals are going to keep going higher and higher, right? I was just on LinkedIn and I see my old firm, American Century, and their brand Avantis Investors just hit $50 billion, right? So it's like, man, I remember when that was zero and
Mhm.
literally went from zero to $50 billion in just 4 years,
Mhm.
right? So it's like the goals are going to keep getting bigger. So it's like as a industry, we're going to have to do a better job of being smarter when it comes to distribution to match that product fit with that product need from the advisor landscape.
Well, there's also an extra $14 trillion sloshing around in the economy after COVID and
Right.
the last couple of years of out of control spending. So there's definitely more money around for
Yes, this.
advisors and asset managers to chase. But in your application, you've got some pretty cool features. One is showing a group of advisors and be able to filter through the advisors in your database by, of course, by AUM, by average allocation size, by their ideal investor type. Are they ESG or not? What's their vehicle preference? Is it limited partnerships? Is it SMAs? Is it hedge funds? Plans for growth? Are they acquisitive? Are they organic? That's a lot of data and a lot of ways to slice and dice um, these target profiles.
Yeah, and it kind of it really takes a fine-tuned approach, right? I mean, for us to be able to know exactly what you like, it takes a lot of data, right? And
Mm.
we're fortunate to have our app.assetlink.ai where advisors come on and they self-report, so to speak. But then there's just so much data out there, right? And as an example, I was just talking to an asset manager that is values based, but it was founded a mutual fund family that's getting into the ETF space, but it was founded on the Mennonite and Amish community, right? And you start thinking about, well, who is their ideal advisor, right? And what does that look like from a geography standpoint? What does that look like from a generation, from a faith perspective, right? But if we're able to glean the type of insights that I were able to identify a subset of advisors, and it's not going to be hundreds of thousands, but if we're able to help that fund family identify, let's call it 200 of their super fans based off of who they are as people, then the mutual fund family is going to have that much more success because they're not spinning their wheels targeting 300 plus thousand advisors. So, hey, here's your 200 or here's your 250 potential super fans, potential shareholders right here, right? You don't need to go anywhere else, right? And that's why we take that deep dive with our filtering.
It's so helpful. I mean, it's something we haven't had. It's just, as you mentioned, you'd have to scroll through so much data, bounce back and forth to different databases, dump stuff out to Excel in order to slice and dice it the way you're just doing with a couple clicks here. It was really impressive, I have to say. And can you talk a little bit about the underlying technology? So clearly, you've got a complex system here, a complex infrastructure that combines natural language processing, machine learning, bunch of databases, a lot of data sources, a lot of filtering, a lot of analysis. How does it work, and what are some of the key aspects of your underlying technology that clients should know more about?
Yeah, so I think what it starts is my first AI white paper was back in 2021, which later ended up leading to two patents, a couple that are still pending in the space, right? And the underlying technology is meant for, system and methods of platform independent knowledge evaluation, and then set selection for online consulting services. So what that means is that we wanted to make sure that we could turn an independent platform like a CRM into an intelligence hub, right? Because a lot of times with platforms now, you input, you input, you input, but what do you get out, right? So we want to make sure that we're able to get the intelligence out of where advisors and asset managers' eyeballs are, right? And when you start thinking about system and methods that are presented and automatically determine the preferences, right? We wanted to be able to perfect that type of technology and really enhance what was done back in 1959 when Art Samuels really pioneered machine learning, be able to use the data for matchmaking and that concept. And then, even back from when Amazon was doing it back in 1997 for the marketplace being able to, being able to match kind of, being able to have that kind of matchmaking algorithms, right? And it's still in, it's still in very much nascent stages, but then being able to create techniques, what we call, bi-directional encoder representation transformers, which is known as BERT, right? So having the BERT model and being able to ingest data at scale. And then once we're able to ingest the data at scale, we made a big bet on retrieval augmentation. And with retrieval augmentation, we wanted to be damn certain that once we're able to create this data moat and then being able to pull any type of data point from an existing 200 plus different data sources to end up in being that helpful hand or that connective tissue or that best friend from an investment sales perspective.
That's a great sales pitch. We're your best friend.
That's, you know what, I think that's what we're going to go with.
So talk to me more about the bidirectional encoder representation. What exactly does that mean, and how does that benefit me if I'm
So
a
here's
wealth
how
or asset manager?
Right. So here's how the BERT system really would enhance a buyer or seller, right? Asset and wealth management, right? Asset and wealth manager. Because you would essentially, the way we would have it is we would have the different data sources into a big data scraper, right? And then once we have the data scraper, then we could do semantically embeds, match that with client preferences, subject matters, keywords, and then text with semantic embedding. And then from there, we're able to use, let's call it like Postgres SQL, and then being able to have all of your clients, consultants, subject matter providers, all in one space, and then being able to separate that out by the preferences. And once we were able to do that with the preferences, then it could be a recommendation engine, right? So you start thinking about, let's call it like a Netflix. When you go into Netflix, you have a cold start. You don't know Netflix. Netflix doesn't know you. But what Netflix does is be able to use all of the data and say, hey, here's the top 10 TV shows in the world. So we don't know you, but we assume based off of all the data Netflix has been able to gather, here is your top 10 in the world. Then as you use it more, then it starts to become fine-tuned, right? And then after, whether it's a month or two, they're spot on, say, hey, Craig, you have an 85% chance of liking this, right? And we're doing something very similar with BERT, right? But it really falls in on the data scraper and being able to pull type of accurate data from these multiple data sources, which is why we go into firms and we say, hey, let us unlock the power of your own data, because in order for all of that technology to work, in order for retrieval augmentation to work, it has to be rooted and grounded in substance. And that means it has to be rooted in your own data, or the hallucination effect will run wild.
So it can still be rooted in data if it's trained on data. Even though it's trained, it still can have hallucinations. Do you have anything that can reduce the hallucinations, like retrieval? Always, is that what you mean? You have in the augmentation, you have retrieval augmented generation RAG. That's what you're using
Yeah,
to reduce.
yeah, that's what we're using. So that's where so
Right,
the bet on RAG is to really fine tune the LLMs.
right,
And because like with the LLMs, yeah, you might have a 15%, or 20% or whatever have you,
mm,
hallucination.
right,
For us, being able to use RAG, and it's easier said than done. And anytime you have unstructured data, it could be an issue, right? Which is
mm,
why it's so important to make it all data uniform. To make being able to go from unstructured to structured, structured to unstructured. People have been trying to solve that for decades,
mm,
right? For a long time, right? But that's what it's going to take. And it's all of this probably sounds easy in elementary, but
yeah,
it's really difficult, right? And in these big firms that they've have an entire entire data science team is still trying to figure this out.
mm,
But with us, there's a difference between a data scientist, a data engineer, and an AI engineer,
mm,
right? Those are different things. And I think from a distribution or head of wealth, you're comfortable with hiring data scientists, but it's going to take a different persona in order to get the type of outcomes we're able to get. As an
mm,
example, for an AI engineer, right? In order for us to even have a second interview with an AI engineer, we give them a coding challenge. And our coding
mm,
challenge is like, hey, here's 10,000 advisors. Here's their FINRA broker check. Here's their LinkedIn. Here's their Facebook. Come up with 50 questions that you could ask, and we'll give you a week to do it.
mm,
Because a lot of times firms might hire a head of AI from Meta, right, or
right,
Amazon or Google. But as you can appreciate, that those wouldn't be builders,
mm,
right? We, as a startup, we need builders, right? We
mm,
need folks that know and that have spent the past 4 or 5 years, building out some pretty cool models and have been testing it out. On the flip side, we at AssetLink, we don't want to be in the business of um, just training models, right? Because it's
mm,
very expensive. And if it's not rooted on the right type of data, you're going to be wasting your time. As an
mm,
example, we were just with, I don't even know if I could say this a lot. We were just with Wells, right? And
mm,
and they have models that are set to hit the market in 2029, right?
mm,
And they've been working on it for 2 years,
mm,
right? So that just goes to show you. And out of 150 models they're training, only 20% actually make it into production.
wow,
So that just goes to show. I mean, there's big money in deep pockets in this space, but it's not easy. So if you have
right,
a firm, so if you have some of these big firms that have all of these models, but they have millions and millions of dollars to be able to dedicate to these models, right?
mm,
We don't we don't have tens and 20 millions of dollars dedicated to training models to
mhm,
maybe make it into Morgan Stanley one day. That's
mhm,
just not the game we want to be in.
right. And on that note, now we know what game you want to be in and what game you don't want to be in. And I think the game you want to be in has got a lot of room for you to run, and hopefully you hit a bunch of home runs there. For people who are listening and they want to learn more about AssetLink, where should they go?
So AssetLink.ai is our site. We are at AssetLink .ai on all social platforms. And my name is Devon Drew, and you can find me on LinkedIn or at an industry conference near you. So
Coming
I'm
to
I'm
an industry
not.
conference near you.
So yeah, I'm not hard to find, and yeah, we appreciate the time and consideration.
Absolutely, man. Remember, that's assetlink.ai, not assetlink.com. That's a different thing. .ai is where you want to go for that. Devon, thanks so much for being here.
Craig, thank you so much for having me.
Hey, it's Craig again. And here are my top three takeaways from this episode. So, AssetLink is a sales enablement platform for wealth and asset managers. That's still relatively new, but they basically ingest data across many systems and sources, put it together, structure it, and then apply some AI to it and surface insights. And this powers features that allow advisors to, what they say, easily discover prospects, filter and segment them, and uncover those needs. It's pretty powerful. I was really impressed with the demo and some of the insights that it surfaced. Now some seemed a little too insightful to me, uh, but I think that's really where we're going with AI. We're going to be seeing a lot more details about prospective clients, and I think it's up to the advisors or asset managers to decide which ones they want to use and which ones might feel a little creepy to the client. We talked a bit about the technology underlying AssetLink, which I thought was interesting. Some of the large language models and how they're ingesting the data and how they're embedding the semantic text. I thought that was pretty interesting, and what they're doing to avoid hallucinations, which, as everyone who has used any AI LLM-based product would understand. And also, finally, they reduce friction between managers and advisors. Um, but avoiding the spray and pray distribution. So instead of bombarding advisors with pitches, they use the advisor data to uncover their needs and match the ideal solution. So pretty powerful product. You can check them out. Well, you've reached the end of the episode of the Wealth Tech Today podcast. Thanks for listening. But before you go, head over to our website, ezragroup.com, and scroll to the bottom of the homepage and sign up for our newsletter. Once a month, you'll receive an email chock full of wealth management goodness, information updates. You will not be disappointed. Thanks for listening, and talk to you all again next time. Oh, and a couple housekeeping tasks before we start. Please subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss an episode. Check out our sponsor, the Invest in Others Charitable Foundation at investinothers.org. All right, let's get the show on the road.